Right. Okay, so for our collage project that we're going to be doing, we're going to need some things to collage. Obviously, you can get some stuff like this, some old magazines, things like that, and you can use some of the different colours from magazines in order to then collage into your picture. And indeed, that's what a lot of artists do when they make paintings. However, you can also make your own textures and paints and surfaces and textures to use when you're working. So that's what I'm going to do here today. Now, so I'm just going to have a little bit of a play around with some different materials and things. So first of all, I've got some Parker Quink ink here, and I've got one of these sponge sticks that I got with a set of brushes quite a long time ago. I have quite a few of these, but they're brilliant for making marks for papers that we can then collage later. I'm going to scan a few of these papers and things so that you can also use them in your own work as well later. So you can print them off and things. So here we go. So you can make marks like this. So all I'm doing is I'm dragging the surface of the sponge over the paper like this. So some quite random marks, but I'll then be able to collage some of these into a landscape. There's some nice ones. So I could go the other way as well. There it is. So I'm doing this as a demonstration, but of course you could later make some of your own in exactly the same way. But you can imagine perhaps tearing some of these up and then collaging them into a landscape as well. So once you get going, playing around with these things, you then start to come up with some other ideas. So I've got another idea here as I could drag some of it, drag some lines back over in the opposite direction. Like that. So we end up with two sets of lines going over the top of one. Let's put one down there. Okay, and I've just noticed that this tool is actually quite good for creating splatters and stuff too. So I'll do a few splatters on the surface. So already within just a few minutes I've created our first textured surface like that. So I'm going to put that one aside because I quite like that obviously what I can also do is I could scan this in, print it off, and then apply other ideas on top of that as well. But there's the first one. That's one sheet with a few different ideas on. The next one I'm going to do is I'm going to use some candle wax like this. So I've just got a piece of candle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put going to try some different marks. So first of all, I'm doing directional, and we've talked about directions quite a lot with landscapes and drawing and things so far. So I'm just going to do some directional lines, and obviously you can't see it at the moment because what we're going to do is we're doing a wax resist technique here. So when I apply some slightly watered down ink over the top of that, we'll be able to see them because the wax in the crayon will resist the water and only go into the spaces that are left behind. So I'm going to do that. And the way to sort of just check how far you've gone is to put it up against the light, and I can see just about the wax, the light hits the wax surface and lets you know a little bit about how much you've done. It's a bit of guesswork, I have to say, but that's kind of, you know, it kind of makes it a little bit more random, I guess. It's a bit more fun. Right, so I'm going to get a little bit of water next. So I've now got a little jar here with some water in, and I'm going to get one of these. I'm going to get like a watercolor brush just here, and perhaps a little dish as well. So I've just got this little lid here, so I can just put some ink in there and some water together. And you need to sort of judge this as you go along as well. So then we can apply the inks over the top like that, and you can see where I haven't got where I haven't put the wax crayon. I've not been too careful or methodical, if you like, about how I apply these marks, but it has worked really well. It does work really well with a bit of Indian, or in this case Parker Quink ink. So I think what I'm going to do here at this stage is I'm going to add a little bit of bleach onto the surface as well. So we've got a nice texture there that could possibly be used and collaged together. So let's just get some. So in this, I've got a little, so this is just a normal household bleach, just here in a lid. And what I'm going to do is just add a touch of water to it, because I don't want it to be too strong. And then if I just put a few little bits of bleach on here, we can add another texture. And what you'll find, particularly if the ink is still wet, is that it will spread. I can splatter it on as well. I'll do a bit more bleaching in a little while, but you kind of get the idea about how we can create some interesting surfaces. So I'm just adding a bit more ink back over the top, so it's not too harsh. It is still a bit harsh. The bleach probably needed watering down a little bit more. So on the next bit here, I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to do some scribbling with the candle. So a nice tight controlled scribble in there. And I think I'll try something on the side of a piece of candle wax as well, to get a grain of some sort. So I've got a scribble here now. There we go. So we'll try that. water and water down ink. A bit of water if you need to, and a bit more ink. There we go. I'm just going back over some of the other bits again. There we go. So scribbly technique. So on the next bit I've got just a smooth candle. The other candle is one of these spirally ones, so it's got a kind of line which actually might be quite interesting to do, but I'm going to try brushing the surface with the side without any hard end, and then I'm going to apply again ink over the top of that. This time, because I can, I'm going to use this again, which is the sponge. So that's quite a nice one. It's a nice result there. So obviously the wax has created much more of a grainy effect on the surface there. I think if I just go a bit darker I can make it a bit harsher as well. There we go. So a nice sort of texture. So that's a bit of wax chrome. Obviously you can explore that quite a lot. You can do a lot more than what I've just done here. But I've got now a few things that I could try out. I might come back to that in a minute actually. But I'm quite pleased with those. Now a lot of the time, obviously some of these look a bit harsh perhaps, some of these, and you think, oh, I don't know how I'm going to use that, but when it comes down to it, you're going to be tearing these pieces of paper up into smaller parts, so you can get quite a lot of different results from these. So I'm going to put that one away for drying at the top, and we've got a new sheet again. So what I thought I would try next is just literally some patterns and things. So and this is where it gets a bit more rhythmic. So I'm just going to do lines of stuff. In a landscape we often see things repeated, like trees, lines in fields and so forth. And there are quite a few collage artists I've seen online, on like Pinterest and things, that will make their own papers to work with. And what we're trying to do for this part of the project is just keep it quite simple. So I'm only using a limited colour palette, and as you can see at the moment that's black, white and grey, but I'm going to add just one or two sheets of other colours as well. So again, you don't need to be too precious about making it perfect. It's more about the rhythm, and in fact I think it makes it a bit more interesting if all the marks vary a little bit, or a lot, as long as they follow this kind of rhythmic repetition. and actually putting in a little bit of the artist's hand, if you like, it makes it a little bit more individual too. Now, that was quite a quick one. So I'm going to just change brushes at this point. I'm going to do a smaller brush, and I'm going to do, let's have a look. I'm going to do little U-shaped circles or whatever. And of course, when you've collaged something, there is absolutely nothing to stop you working back in to a landscape or a piece of work that you've made using other materials, such as we could use the old biros that I love using so much. We could use some paint on the surface to change the balance of the light and the dark areas. We could do glazes with acrylic paints on top as well. So by no means is a piece of paper stuck into a collage the end result. And in fact, there are some pretty fantastic artists that will attest to that in their own work. So I'm going to do 2 more lines on that one. And I'll try something else using the spongy stick. Then I've got 1 or 2 other little tools that I'm going to just experiment with a little bit as well. There we go. So a couple more of those. I mean, if you wanted to do like a guideline thing, you know, to sort of help you with that, you could as well. If you want to keep them straight. I'm not that bothered because I know that I'm going to be tearing these up. So here's my sponge once more. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to use the end of the sponge to create a pattern or some sort of idea. So I'm just going to do this. Just get a bit more on there. So just dabbing the end of my sponge onto the surface of the paper. I've created like these, I don't know, we could call them fence posts, I suppose, or stubble from fields. Obviously I'm doing this portrait, or I'm doing it on a landscape piece of paper but going down it, so I could be going across it, but again, I don't mind. You could get different size sponges. You could also cut out bits from sponges as well. Lots of fun doing this, and I'm just twizzling the end of my sponge so that all the little lines that I'm using here go in different directions. There we go. I've got other ideas, of course, but as you start doing things, you start coming up with new ones. Always the case. So I'm going to do this. This is just laying the brush on the surface, hardly touching it, and moving it around to get some scribbly lines. And we'll go back to the bleach, I think, on top of that. There we go, so some more marks on there. And then what I might do is I'll just pick up a little bit of bleach. And this, just move that over so you can see that a bit better. I'm going to just dab it. There's some really tiny lines. They might spread out a bit because the ink is still wet. But again, could be quite interesting. Be using in the collage. And what you do, you know, I mean, if you do this a lot, you know, you might find that there's some that you just haven't got enough of and you've got to make some more. But you kind of discover, and then you might think of another idea, but you discover what things are going to work in your pictures quite well. This looks, I suppose, a little bit batik-y as well, in a way. So that will continue to bleach out the longer I leave it. So this is Quink ink, or Parker Quink ink, and it works really well with bleach. I don't think it works particularly well with Indian ink, but you could have a go and prove me wrong. Haven't got my Indian ink out for this. Okay, so that's that. And then just wash the brush a little bit. So there's another one. So technique number, or sheet number 3. Put that up there. So what I thought I'd try next is I've got some kitchen towel here, and I'm going to try just making something that I can create a mark with from it. So I just make this, twist it around so that the end of it has got this kind of pattern on it. I'm going to see if I can get some sort of marks out of that next. So first of all, let's come out a little bit. So first of all, I want some ink on here which is a little bit watery, perhaps, because I know that the tissue will soak it up, especially to begin with. Right, so there we go. So I've got something on there, so I'm just going to do a little test. Yeah, so let's just have a go. So I think we'll need to zoom in so we can see what I'm doing. So just over here, look, I've created a repeating sort of texture. Very subtle one. I can just carry on creating that by pressing down on my tissue. It doesn't take long at all to create a new texture once more. I'm going to get one more out of that. One more row. And then I think I'm going to try some lines as well. There we go. So the bumps and the ripples on the tissue are creating that kind of nice texture on there. And you might have seen something like that before. So now I think I would like in my landscape to have some nice lines and things. So I'm going to try out a few line techniques on the surface as well. so let's do that. So I'm just going to put that on there. And I'm going to just I'm not going to try and do perfect lines or anything. I'm going to do ragged sorts of lines going down here, maybe to reflect the landscape a little bit. And I'm going to I will follow some of the little ripples and things that I leave. Make some of the lines go a bit thinner sometimes too. And then we'll try some more patterns. I'm quite keen to try out some of those too. There we go. So it's going to be quite fun. Get a bit closer. You can just see there the lines that I'm creating a little bit more. So I'm just running. What I'm doing here is I'm not using my wrist at all. I'm just literally dragging my arm across the paper. So this paper is about A3 size. You don't need that size. You can have little scraps of paper and do them if you want to. In fact, whilst you're creating your pictures, you might decide, oh, I could make this, I could make that. You know, you could try out some different ideas. Once you get into the rhythm of just playing with the materials, which is really important to do, you start to just get a feel for how you can use and create things to make pieces of artwork from, which I really, you know, something that I really enjoy. But often, because I'm making art, and I've got some particular techniques that I'm very fond of, I don't really take as much time as this as I should do. But it is really beneficial and good fun. So I've also got these fan-shaped brushes, which we'll try in just a second. So you can see I'm going a bit quicker now because I'm getting into the flow of it, and I'm also quite excited about trying the next thing. Yeah. Okay, so let's get the fan shape brush. I've got a few of these. I've not used them as much as perhaps I would have liked, but I'm going to try out a fan shape brush and see if I can make some marks on the next bit. So first of all, I'm going to make sure I've got plenty of watered down ink on here. To load up my brush. There we go. Dip my brush in the water. So I've got some ink here, so let's see what we can do. So I'm just holding it very loosely, and I'm not gonna, so it's very similar actually to what we had with the other one with the sponge. It's quite similar to that. I've got and I suppose you could call it a kind of rake technique because you're raking the surface. So I'm thinking maybe grass or something like that. We'll try some longer bits as well in just a second. So I'm overlapping all the marks, again not being particularly precious, about them, because essentially we want some like textures and lines that we can just use to collage with. So that's quite interesting, that one. As you can see, we've got lots of overlapping kind of reiki sorts of marks on there. I'm going to try now using this brush just to create some lines that go across, a bit like what I did with the brush earlier. So we're just going to do this. So I'm literally letting the brush do the work. And you can see that it's getting more liney as I do it, actually, which is really cool. And I'm making it wiggly to suggest the landscape. I could try, and I might do that in just a second, do some straight ones as well. So, you know, if you try and make these on your own, you'll actually find that you come up with loads of ideas as you're working. So rather than, I mean, you might have a plan about how you're going to go about trying these things out, but once you start going, there's stuff what I'm doing right now that I hadn't thought of before I came to do this with you. So I've got a few more there. Look, I'm going to put those up there. Sheet number 4. So let's try with a slightly larger fan brush. There's my larger fan brush. Dip it in some water a bit. And I'm going to try some like more flowing lines. Like this. And let's just zoom out a little bit again. There we go. So I'm going to try some more flowing sorts of lines. I'm going to overlap them. There we go. I kind of like that, but I think I could go further. So I'm going to see if I can also use the brush like this to put some stumpy bits in. If you turned it around, you could then perhaps see how that might be useful in there too. If I turn it that way, that could easily be a field or something like that, couldn't it, as well? So we're using a lot of our imagination here to help us come up with these ideas, of course. Now the other thing, I've just thought of another idea, so let me get that small rake fan brush thing. Okay, and we're just gonna get a bit more ink. So I thought maybe if I twist it around in a circle, I don't think you need quite as much ink on the brush to start with, because what tends to happen is you get these blocky bits. So I'm just trying out something completely weird now, which is doing these kind of circular motions overlapping each other. So you might think, oh well, you know, I want these little circles and things to be recognizable when I actually do this, but that's not necessarily what you're trying to do. You might just tear a single little strip out of that. So there we go. There's another one tried out. So I've got very different lines on here but using a very similar tool, or the same sort of tool actually. Right. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do, I'm going to put watery ink on the whole area, the larger brush, and then I'm going to use the bleach again whilst it's quite wet, hopefully. Just drop it on. So it's quite watery ink, but still quite dark. There we go. So that's still quite wet. I'm just going to put some more water on to make sure. And then here's my bleach. Oops. Let's just put a bit more water with that. So all I'm doing there, I'm dropping the watered down bleach. If it's too strong, you tend to get more of this kind of effect here, but I can create this kind of splattered effect on here as well, which can be replicated or used for ideas on landscapes. Now obviously if you're using bleach, be warned. You know it stains clothes, so wear an apron or some old clothes at least. That's quite nice actually. I quite like what I've done there. And then I'm going to go back to the wax crayons as well. I'm going to put some, I'm going to do some straight lines going across, and then I'm going to do the same technique on top. So lots of straight lines all going in the same direction, and then pretty similar to what I've done actually, this one, I suppose. Try lines first of all. Hold the paper down, help. Nice horizontal scratchy lines. Like that. And then I'll get a really equal brush and bleach again, which I have also watered down. And I'm just going to put in a few bits of lines whilst it's wet. Now the next thing I'm going to do is some fading, I think. So I've got some faded areas because they're quite useful too. So some tonal ranges to work with, because we've got lots of very harsh, I suppose, black and white areas, but we could do with some tonal ranges to collage too. So there's that one. A quick one. So I'm going to start off with just a plain old bit of black. So the paper I'm using is cartridge paper, A3 cartridge paper, which is, you know, I bought it in bulk for, I think it was 200 sheets for £26. So it means that I've got the freedom to sort of play around with the papers a little bit and not worry overly about how much I use. and I don't do this all the time, so it's pretty good. So I'm going to add a bit of water. To the ink, and then I'm going to do the same again in just a second. So I've got a lighter area of ink just there, and then I'm going to add more water to the ink so it's very diluted, and add that. So we've got a lighter area there, and then do it again. So you would have seen when we've done inks before, you'd have seen me doing this as a demo to show you how you can dilute inks down to create different tonal ranges. Now I'm just using dirty water from my ink water pot. So I've now got that. I've got this. So let's just try. Just wondering if I put little bits in there. Right. Okay, so now I've got a tonal range of inks. That was very quick once more, which I can also rip up and tear and cut. And now I want to do a bit of a fade. So I'm going to paint some ink on, add some water, and just start just outside of there. Add a bit more water. Add a bit more water. Like so. So I've now also got faded area, and because this is water, it'll obviously spread of its own accord on the paper too. There we go. Right, and again, do it again. Some water. And the other thing you can also do, of course, is you could paint on some different surfaces. So you could paint on maps and so forth if you wanted to. There we go. So I've got some faded areas. A little bit of bleach creeping in there. Right, so looks a bit scruffy, but it's quite nice because it means I've got a little bit more tone to play with. Just going to do a bit more over here, I think. There we go. There, and sometimes when the water is wet, you can also pick the paper up and let it kind of run into each other a little bit. Now the thing with this paper is it's not watercolor paper or anything like that, so if I overwork this paper, it will start to soak through and then it'll get holes in there, or the paper will just come up and you get these little speckly bits on there as well. But that will be absolutely fine for the purposes of what I want to use this for. So that's that one, and so that's about 6 or 7 sheets I've done there. But what I'm going to do just to finish this off then is I'm just going to do a few like little patterny areas and things in here too, because I quite like doing those. So I'm just going to use this extra big brush to do these arcs here. Like It's about, again, like I said before, just having just a bit of rhythm. They can all be a bit different to each other. But if you're repeating the same sort of pattern, if you like, or brush strokes similar, then you will get kind of something that could be interesting to use later. Do a couple more rows of these. Try something else. If you look on the internet, there's absolutely hundreds of ideas. I'm just doing things straight out of my head here. But you can, if you look up ink patterns and things, you'll find some really cool stuff that you can try out for yourself. Awesome. Doing random lines now. I'll try some more of these. Van Gogh-y sorts of brush strokes, I guess. I haven't done any just dots, which would be quite nice to do. So things like this, quite nice for the flow of water or something, I guess. And these are all dry. I'll scan them in and put them on the website for you to use. But quite happy, of course, happier even, if you come up with some of your own to share with everybody too. We'll do a few more in the lesson. So the size of your marks could also be useful, because if you've got little marks towards the back of a landscape and larger ones towards the foreground, then you're going to create a sense of space within a landscape too. And if you keep some ink next to you while you're collaging, of course you can always work into these and add more of your own stuff too. But I quite like the effect of tearing and ripping and things. There we go. Maybe some zigzags. Or wavy lines at least. All right, so I'm going to finish off doing this little bit of a sheet. I'm going to scan these in for you so that we've got these available for the next week or even 2 weeks. But I hope you've enjoyed just watching that, or at least I hope it's given you a few ideas of how you can approach collage or preparation for collage over the next few weeks. Okay, so I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you very soon. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.